Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of How Leaders Lead with David Novak. Today's guest is Blake Mycoskie, and you might remember Blake as the founder of TOMS shoes, which is a brand that really helped redefine how people think about business and impact. Blake grew TOMS shoes to a $700 million business based on a simple idea: sell a pair of shoes and give a pair of shoes away to a child in need. Now, that success didn't protect Blake from a 7-year battle with depression. And after he sold TOMS, he really lost his sense of purpose and nearly lost himself. Today, Blake is back with a new mission. He's tackling the mental health crisis through his brand, Enough, which seeks to empower people to talk about how they're really doing so that everyone in this world feels a little less alone and everybody knows that they are enough. For Blake, staying connected to your why is absolutely critical in business, and it is essential in life. Enjoy this conversation between David and Blake, and I will see you at the very end of the episode for the debrief.
Before we get into TOMS, and what you're doing with Enough, both fantastic causes, I want to take you back a little bit. What's the story from your childhood that shaped the kind of leader you are today?
I mean, I think it really was just having amazing parents. My dad was a doctor and a great leader in his community and the hospitals that he helped, run. And my mom wrote a cookbook and sold millions of copies of it and helped people with their health. And I just think that, I had such great role models with them growing up about wanting to do things to help people that it really shaped, who I became.
So when you were coming up as a kid, do you recall an experience where you really realized for the first time what leadership is all about?
I think actually in my first business, I had a laundry business. I would do pickup and delivery laundry on my college campus. And, I think what I realized in that business was I had to do every single part of the business in order to be a good leader of the business. And that meant staying up all night doing people's laundry myself, not just picking up and delivering it. That meant learning about all the different, chemicals used in dry cleaning so that I could talk to the customer with confidence. I had to get my hands dirty, no pun intended. And that's not what I set out to do. Originally, I was just going to pick up and deliver the laundry. And it wasn't until we got going that I realized I actually had to do the laundry to be able to manage the people that would ultimately do it every day.
Yeah, I learned a little bit about that business, and it's a great business, but you realized you really had to target the parents.
That's right.
Cool, that was, how'd you get that insight?
That's the best marketing story. So that's really, talking about marketing. So we launched the business and we offered it to all the students at SMU where I went to college, and we hardly got any customers. And we were really thought we were just kind of dead in the water with this idea. We didn't understand why, because we knew kids didn't like doing their laundry, but we couldn't get them to fork over the money for us to pick up and deliver it. Then the next year, we got a booth right at the orientation. And our booth was right next to where you bought the books, and I think right between where you got your meal plan. And so what happened was, by being there, by having that booth there, every parent assumed that every student signed up for laundry service, because it was like, of course they're got to buy books, and of course they have to eat. So laundry's in the middle. Let's sign up for that too. And literally went from having no business to hundreds of thousands of dollars in laundry sales in one day. And that's when I dropped out of college and never went back.
Oh my God. Well, that is such a great story. And now I know why you were staying up all night doing the laundry. That was a big start,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
At what point, did you realize that you were really wired to start up things and create things?
It was interesting. I remember going to Bank of America to get my checking account set up for Easy Laundry. And I was 19 years old. And the guy said, "Man, you're a young entrepreneur." And I had no idea what that word meant. I mean, I never had heard it in my life. And so I literally went back, and this obviously dates me. I probably looked up in a dictionary, the word entrepreneur, and I don't remember exactly the definition, but I was like, yeah, that sounds about like me. And from that day on, my identity was, I'm an entrepreneur.
I heard you say that when you're young and you start business, and you started a few businesses even before you got to Tom's,
Yeah,
you said you got to
5
fake
companies, yeah.
yeah, 5 companies. That's a lot of companies. That's a lot of ideas you have. But you said that, when you're young and you're starting up this business, you have to fake it until you make it. Explain.
Sometimes you just gotta act the part. So, when I was young, that meant putting a coat and tie on when traveling, so I looked a little older and looked like I was responsible enough to do business. As I got older, and that wasn't as big of a deal, then oftentimes in business, you got to talk like as if it's already happened. So it's you got to talk about the customers, whether you have them or not. And so I think sometimes, it really is about living the part or faking it until you make it. I got that from my nana, by the way. She used to always say that to me, and she was a big influence on my life. But I do think you got to kind of act the part, even if it hasn't been given to you yet.
Yeah. I interviewed Tom Brady once, and he mentioned the same thing. So maybe he knew your nana. you know, now speaking of acting and acting the part, I also understand that before Tom's, you were a reality TV star. Tell us that story.
Yeah, so my sister and I were lucky enough to be selected to go on The Amazing Race. And The Amazing Race, for those who have not seen it, is basically a scavenger hunt around the world. We were on the season 2, and we raced around the world for 30 days straight. And after 30 days, we lost the $1 million prize by 4 minutes. And it was my fault.
What happened?
So it's this great, CBS. At this point, this show is like, I think the number 2 watched show on all of television. 22 million people a week were tuning in. So CBS did the most perfect editing job to make me and look like, kind of your typical guy who won't stop and ask for directions. So what happens is we get to San Francisco. It's the final city. There's only 3 teams left, $1 million on the line. We've been racing for 29 days. And we get there and we get a clue, and it says, go to Pier 31. Now, I had never been to San Francisco. My sister had never been. And I think piers are on the water. Let's get to the water. And so my sister says, hold on, wait, let's just get a map and let's really make sure we're going the right place because we can't afford to make a mistake. I said, Paige, piers are on the water. I see the water. Let's go to the water. And she said, okay, fine. So, of course, the way that San Francisco is mapped out, it's like this big kind of half circle of all these different piers. There's a lot of them. And so we run to the water. Well, we get to a pier, but we get to Pier 2, and we're on the exact opposite side of the city where Pier 31 is, and we went the exact wrong way. We still hustled and hustled and hustled, and we still almost caught back up to win, but we lost by 4 minutes. If we had not made that mistake, we might have won by an hour.
Looking back at that, broadly speaking, how do you think that shaped your leadership style, if at all?
I think that, I've also, my dad, this is a funny saying. My dad says about me, he says, Blake is often wrong, but never in doubt. I think I've learned this lesson the hard way several times. I'm hoping with enough. I'm moving with a little bit more wisdom and not being so impulsive. Because, so my impulsivity, especially in business and even in my personal life, to be honest, has caused me some problems.
Yeah, we're going to get to enough in a few minutes here. But first of all, how'd you get the idea for Tom's?
So in Tom's, I was just traveling. I was down in South America. I was kind of in between entrepreneurial ventures, not really knowing what I was going to do next. And I did some volunteer work. And when I was doing some volunteer work, I saw all these kids that did not have shoes and that they needed them to go to school as part of the uniform requirement. And I thought, man, that's really sad that these kids don't get to go to school because they don't have a pair of shoes. And at the same time, I kept seeing all these farmers and like young people around town wearing this shoe called the Alpargata, which is this very simple canvas shoe. I'd never seen it in the United States before. And they were very inexpensive to buy at the markets down there. And I thought, I wonder if I could, sell these shoes in the U.S., and every time I sell a pair, I would give a pair to one of these children that don't have shoes. And that idea became Tom's.
Wow, that's such a great insight again. And early on, and you mentioned you had 5 businesses before you started Tom's, which is amazing. What do you look for when you decide whether you really have an idea? What are you paying attention to, Blake?
I think the most important thing is that I like to have absolutely zero experience in the industry.
Tell me about that.
I mean, literally, I had never done laundry before, hardly in my life when I started my laundry business. I didn't know anything about the outdoor advertising business when I started my outdoor advertising company. I started my driver's ed company. I'd gone to driver's ed, but I sure didn't have any experience in, what it takes to teach kids to drive. TOMS is the same thing. The reality cable channel, the same thing. I mean, literally every business I've started, I've had no experience. And I think that is a huge asset. And the
Why
reason is because you don't know all the pre-established rules of the industry. So it's easy to break them. It's easy to be innovative. It's easy to be courageous because you haven't been told, oh, this is the way you have to do it. You have to do it this way. And I think that thinking is what limits a lot of innovation. I think that's what limits big companies. And that's why small startups you see totally upend big companies all the time, because the big companies are stuck in their own way of thinking. And I think that's a big, big advantage to entrepreneurs. And I also think that's why so most of the biggest, most breakthrough brands in the world are started people under 30 years old.
I wrote this book called How Leaders Learn, and I wish I would have interviewed you before I wrote it because I'm sure I could have gotten a chapter out of you. So you don't know anything, but you got to learn enough to get up to speed, really, break through in a category, even if you're disrupting it. What's your process for really learning how to lead a business in a new category that you know nothing about?
I go with complete humility to whoever the best in the business is and ask them for a coffee or advice or a quick phone call. I think that, one of the best ways to learn is once you have an idea is to find out who are the real experts in the industry. But, it's kind of after you have your idea. So your idea is built around innovation and not knowing the rules. But once you're in it, and now you got to be a good leader and you got to really learn how to grow it, that's where I do think other people who've gone down that path before can be really helpful.
Your curiosity meter must be off the chart.
It is. So I didn't graduate from college, as I shared earlier. And I think that's always been a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. And so I've always been wanting to be really well educated, even though I didn't go to college. So I read pretty much every single business biography you've ever heard of. I mean, that was my education. And I call those guys my mentors. I mean, I now know Richard Branson and have done a lot of stuff with him. But for years, I had never met Richard, and I still called him one of my mentors. Same with Yvon Chouinard at Patagonia. So I don't think you actually have to know the person or meet them for them to be one of your mentors, especially with, as much as you can learn about someone with podcasts and books and everything online.
That's a great point. I want to go back to TOMS again. Tell me about the day things really broke open for TOMS. When did you know that you really had created a rocket ship of a business?
I think two things happened, and both of them involved the media. The first the first big press piece was in the LA Times, and it was a small article, but it was on the Sunday edition of the LA Times. And from that one article, we got 2,000 orders. Now, the problem with that is at that point, I only had about 150 pairs in my apartment. So what that created was my first of many supply chain problems to come. But 2,000 orders from a single article, that got my attention. The second thing is I was in the New York City airport once, and this is only kind of 2 months after we started, and I was not wearing TOMS on this day. And I was wearing my running shoes because I had gone for a jog in Central Park before I had to get to the airport. And there was a girl at the check-in counter of American Airlines wearing a red pair of TOMS. Now, at this point, I had never seen a stranger wearing our shoes, right? And I was like, wow, this is so cool. Like, someone bought these shoes on their own. They're not my family. They're not my friend. And they're wearing them, and I'm going to ask her about them. So I go up to her and I say, excuse me, I couldn't help but notice I really love these red shoes you're wearing. What are they? And I'm doing the check-in counter at American Airlines, and she goes, oh, they're TOMS shoes. And I'm like, oh, cool. And I keep doing the check-in, and she grabs my shoulder, and she goes, no, you don't understand. And I was like, what? She goes, when I bought this pair of shoes, they gave a pair to a child in need in, I think, Argentina or Africa. And this guy who started it, I heard he lives on a sailboat in Los Angeles. And she keeps going. And I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. I said, okay, I gotta confess. Um, I'm actually that guy. I started Tom's. And she looked at me and she's like deer in headlights, right? She can't believe it's me. And she goes, oh my gosh. She goes, but why did you cut your hair? That was her question. But the point of the story is that if a stranger in the airport was going to stop someone to tell them the whole story about this business and why they bought the shoes and everything about the founder, then clearly she was telling all her friends on Facebook back in the day. She was probably giving these shoes to friends and family. Like, I knew we had something that really was going to go viral.
That's interesting. It's a great story. And when you see that word of mouth happening, man, that's when you know you've got something. But, you know, that laundromat business that you started, the laundry business, that, you got these avalanche of orders like almost overnight. You had this huge sensation. You have 2,000 orders of Toms after that. Many businesses buckle and fold when they get under that kind of pressure to really provide what you've offered up. What learning did you have on how to survive success? Because that's massive success, and if you don't handle it right, you're toast.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. I mean, I think I was a very competitive tennis player growing up, and I was very used to pressure and an individual sport where you've got to. There's no one else on the team to do it. You got to do it yourself. So I think I was a little bit prepared, for at least from a mental toughness standpoint of dealing with that success. But I think more than anything, it's kind of focusing on what are the most important things that you absolutely must do. And I still do this today because I have so many things going on. When something like that happens, like, okay, what are the most important things when we get 2,000 orders and we only have 160 pairs of shoes? Well, the most important thing is that we email every single one of those customers. We tell them, thank you so much for your order. And we had no idea that we would ever get this response. And it's going to take us 8 weeks to make your shoes instead of the 3 days like it says on our website. And will you please not cancel your order? You come with humility, you come with honesty. And with that, we didn't have a single person cancel their order. It took us another 8 weeks to make those shoes. When the laundry business, when we got hundreds of thousands of dollars of orders, and at that point we had one truck and just me and my roommate as employees. I mean, then you just have to go into hustle mode, because we couldn't not do their laundry next week. So that was just literally like a bunch of coffee, dropping out of college, asking favors friends, posting ads in the yellow pages. I mean, it was just pure hustle. So sometimes all you can do is just get your hustle on.
Yeah, great. And with Tom's, you had such a noble cause. With your one-on-one model, every purchase was helping someone in need. Uh, what's your favorite story about making a positive difference in someone's life?
Oh man. I mean, there's this one amazing story. I mean, there's so many, but there's this one that comes to mind. And that was this woman came to us crying after we gave shoes to her kids in this little village in Argentina. And she explained that now both of her kids would go to school every day. And when we asked her to explain, she showed us a pair of like men's dress shoes, not even appropriate shoe for either of her boys to be wearing. And she said they had been sharing this pair of shoes for a year. And what that meant was one of her boys would go to school wearing the men's dress shoes on Monday. And then he would bring them back, and his brother would go to school on Tuesday while he stayed home. They were alternating days of school based off this pair of shoes that didn't fit either of them. And now they were going to go to school both days, every day, wearing the proper shoes. And that was just, I'll never forget that moment.
That's a story you'll never forget. I've always believed, Blake, that creating shared experiences can really galvanize a team. And people can look back and say, I remember when we did this and that, or we learned this or that. Tell me about your shoe drops and the impact that had on your team.
Yeah, I mean, one of the great things that we got to do with our team and then eventually even with our customers was take them to different places around the world and give shoes to these children. I mean, we were giving millions of shoes away each year when the company was really growing, but it was more about those little moments of a specific kid that you remember and that you connected to. And so we would take our employees, always got to go every year, no matter how big we got. I think even we had 300 employees, still we paid for every employee to go in a developing country every year to give away shoes. I went on a lot of these trips. And what it did is it brought back just an amazing sense of purpose. As our shoe company is growing, I mean, TOMS was the fastest growing shoe company in the world for 3 years. So, we were growing rapidly, building a very big business. I mean, our sales, I think, topped out at like $700 million a year. So this was a real shoe business that was growing quickly. And what kept us focused on the why, which is always so important. I mean, one of my favorite videos of all time is Simon Sinek's Why video, which I'm sure you've seen, and it talks about, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And we had to stay connected to the why. And the way we stayed connected to the why, the way I stayed connected to the why is going on those giving trips, putting shoes on kids' feet. And, it's a bit, I'm taking that lesson now. I know we're going to get to enough, but I'm using that lesson a lot with us building this Enough movement because, it's a lot of work. And everyone is really doing, the single job of 5 people. And we have to keep connected to the why of using this to hopefully help our collective mental health. So staying connected to the why is so, so important in galvanizing a team.
I'm curious. Did you ever have people criticize your business or you personally claiming you were actually doing more harm than good in the places you're trying to help? I mean, I know that sounds like a
Yeah.
strange question, but
No, absolutely.
it happens. There are haters out there.
They're and even more so today probably than back then because it's just easier to be anonymous online. But yeah, we did. We had a time period in which people were really like attacking us for not making the shoes in every country that we're giving in. I mean, they clearly didn't understand the supply chain. And frankly, at first I was like offended by that, but we actually used some of that criticism to evolve our business, which actually ended up saving us money and helping in even more ways. And I'll use an example. We started making shoes in Ethiopia and in Haiti, where we gave away a lot of shoes. And by making the shoes there, not only were we creating extra jobs in those communities, but we didn't have to ship them all the way from Asia. And so we ended up saving money in our distribution as well. So sometimes, if you don't take it personally, you can actually take some of that criticism and turn it into something for good. And we did that at TOMS.
Yeah, I don't know where it says it in the Bible, but one of the things I remember was, people accuse you of doing wrong when you do good anyway.
Exactly.
And you actually did the good and
Yeah.
when you took the criticism and did even more good, which is a great way to turn it on its ear. So Blake, you build this TOMS business to $700 million. You got a great business, fastest growing shoe business. Looking back, what do you think were the top 2 or 3 strategic decisions you made to really drive that business?
Number one is we did not do marketing. We just focused on amplifying everyone's stories. So we took our customers on giving trips in Cambodia and Guatemala and allowed them to, put those photos on their Facebook and their MySpace. And I mean, this was even before a lot of the social media. It worked probably even better today. But really focusing on storytelling and giving and not traditional marketing, I think was what allowed us to grow so fast and to grow so profitably. So I would say that was number one. Number two is it wasn't until later, but in the early days when we were growing rapidly, again, we were not a big group of experts. These were a lot of young kids I hired off Craigslist, and they just had a passion for what we were doing, and they had a great attitude, and they would work harder than anyone. That culture really drove the growth of TOMS as well, because everyone there was in it for the right reason and really, really kind of committed to doing whatever it took. And we kept that culture good by taking people, once again, on the giving trips to keep them connected to the why. And then the other thing that I think we did especially well in the beginning and not so well towards the end was we just focused on one product, one shoe, just making that shoe the most iconic silhouette in the world at that time. And then later, as we started to expand to more different types of shoes, while it initially helped sales grow, it ultimately, I think, took attention away from our core product, which ultimately ended up hurting the business.
Culture is very interesting. I never really liked the word itself, although I understand it. It reminds me too much of a germ. When I think of culture, it's basically what behaviors, do you want to have as a team? How do we work together? How are we going to work together? What do you think is the most important behavior you can drive when you're building any culture that of a business that you would create?
I think it goes back to that shared why, like bringing people in that are there for the right reasons. They're not there because this is the next best thing on their resume. They're not there because it's all about the money. They're not there because, this is the hot company and, whatever. Like they're there because they really believe in the mission, and the company has a mission that is worth believing in. And I think that is, at least in the businesses I've started, really having people connected and there for the why, I think is great. And then the other thing, as a leader, I think it's like not take yourself too seriously, always be humble, always be curious, create the least amount of kind of hierarchical structure as possible. I mean, those are just the things that have really worked for me.
Hello, friends. I hope you are loving this conversation between David and Blake. Be sure to stay tuned to the very end of the episode where David and I break down his conversation with Blake and offer some real tangible ways that you can take what you've learned from the episode and apply it to your leadership and to your life. Stay tuned to the very end, and I will see you soon.
Eventually you took TOMS away from the one-on-one model, but you've also used that one-on-one model in other categories. How do you make that decision? Like you did in your eyewear business, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's really a simple decision. I mean, I started TOMS not as a business. It was actually just called a project. And the project was based on, I wanted to help kids get shoes. And then as I grew the business, I realized, oh, wow, this one-for-one model is actually like really works because it's easy to understand. It's we can build the cost of it into the product. People love the directness of it. And so, yes, when we launched TOMS Eyewear, and we did the same thing. We provided an eye surgery or reading glasses to someone who needed them when you bought the eyewear. So I think the one-for-one model really worked well. It doesn't work in all businesses, but it worked really well for TOMS.
But how'd you get the courage to pivot from the very thing that you were known for? Because you stopped it at TOMS. And
no, I didn't stop it. When I sold the company, they stopped it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's a very important distinction there.
Thank you very much for clarifying that.
Yeah.
Well, what'd you think? Here you are, the founder of this. When you heard that,
I was not happy.
What did you think? Yeah,
I was not happy.
I imagine you weren't really consulted on that issue.
No, I was not.
Well, how'd you deal with that?
I mean, it's kind of like, look, I have an 8 and 11-year-old right now, and I'm doing everything I can to make them into the most amazing human beings possible. And someday they're going to leave my house and they're going to go out. They're going to make their own decisions. And, I'm going to love them no matter what. And some decisions they'll make I'll agree with, and some I won't agree with, but I'll continue to be their cheerleader. And that's what I always say about TOMS. I'm TOMS' biggest cheerleader. I think the company is still doing great work. They're doing it differently. They're not doing it with the one-for-one model that I created, but they're still doing a lot of good in the world. And so I'm cheering them on.
So, you sell this huge business, that's most time when people take the victory lap, you go on the big cruise, you do something. I mean, how did it impact you? I mean, as an individual, having that kind of success and then selling what you basically, it was your baby.
The reality is I didn't do very well. First off, I was not prepared for it. I didn't understand that when I sold it, I would really lose a sense of purpose. I also lost my community because all my friends still worked at TOMS. I also decided at the same time to move to Jackson Hole because I love snowboarding. And I thought now that I'm, quote, retired, I can snowboard every day. And it gets dark at 5 p.m. in Jackson Hole half the year. And that wasn't good for me. And I started to get depressed. And I'd never been depressed, really a day in my life. And I actually think the depression started a little bit before I sold the company. I think that kind of led to me, not feeling as connected to the brand that led to it. But yeah, and then after I got depressed, what was interesting is, and I think this isn't probably just, unique to me, is I was I never had these horrible feelings, and I tried to do everything I could to make them go away. And I had a lot of money, so I started throwing money at it. So I built this crazy house. I went on all the crazy trips. I moved my family from Jackson Hole to Costa Rica. I got divorced. I got married. I got divorced again. Like I made a huge mess of my life because I was doing anything to, frankly, not feel the way that I was feeling. What I really recognized was underneath all of it, and this is what I, came to after lots of therapy, was that there was this feeling that I have never been enough and that I was never enough. And I unfortunately had to look at all of my actions in my life, and I saw that my life wasn't as much a success story as my life was like a strategy. And the strategy was doing all these things to earn my worth because I didn't believe that I had it intrinsically. And that started what became like a 7-year period of a really intense depression.
Wow. You think that sense of not having enough is what was one of the key drivers of your success in business? I mean, you mentioned that your lack of a college education had a chip on your shoulder. I mean, you know, how much did that drive you?
I do think it drove me. Um, and at the same time, I don't think it was necessary for my success. I think that, as I've learned more about, me struggling with this for so long, is I think that it does create a pressure that can drive you, but it also is at a huge cost. And I think the reality is now, as I think about building something where I'm building it from a place of wholeness, I'm actually having a lot more fun, and I think I'm being just as effective. So I think it is a little bit of a misnomer about the fact that you kind of need that drive in order to be successful. Yes, you need drive, but that level of pressure I was putting on myself just wasn't healthy.
What advice would you give to other leaders on how to pick up the signs maybe that you're starting to have some, mental health issues who might be quietly struggling inside but just aren't really dealing with it?
Yeah, I think that there's some pretty telltale signs. I mean, number one is I think the things that you used to love and that you used to have joy just aren't providing that to you anymore. So that could be golf if you're a golfer, surfing, that was it for me. Time with friends, even going to your favorite restaurants. Like if not all of a sudden, but if you start to feel the things that consistently gave you joy and happiness are no longer doing so, that might be a sign that you're starting to slip into a depression. For some people, it's either they stop eating completely or they overeat all the time. It's usually one or the other. I didn't have as much of an appetite myself. And then also the biggest thing is, and this is what unfortunately leads to, these horrible, rates of suicide in our country, is you really isolate. Because you're ashamed, especially if you're successful. I mean, I'm so excited to talk about this on this podcast because I know that there's going to be a lot of successful men and women listening. And the thing is we're taught to believe that if you're financially successful, if you're a leader, then what do you have to worry about in your life? If you've got a great house, great family, great job, like you don't get the right to feel depressed. You don't get the right to feel anxious. And I felt that in so much that like I didn't even post a single post on social media for 3 years because I was so ashamed of the way I was feeling and I didn't want anyone to know. And I didn't want to lie about it. I couldn't go. That's even worse when you have to go put on the fake smile. And so I just isolated more and more and more. And frankly, that almost, led me to taking my life.
Wow. Thanks so much for sharing that, Blake. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's
It's
helpful
so important.
to
It's just
so
so
many
important.
people.
And if you're listening to this right now, the most important thing, if you're starting to feel like you're getting really depressed or you're feeling trapped or life is just not, you've got to talk to someone. You absolutely, the most important thing is tell one person and be radically honest. Tell them how bad it is. If you're having suicidal thoughts, tell them exactly what you're having, when you're having it, how you're having it. Because the minute you start telling people, the research shows is a dramatic improvement in what potentially, is the outcome in your mental health. So I was really lucky. I started talking to people. I started being honest about it to my close friends and family. And ultimately I got the help that, not only, helped me really understand why I was feeling the way I was feeling, but start to feel better. And that ultimately led to, to what I'm doing now.
And speaking of now, you've recently launched a new brand. enough? How'd that come to be?
I mean, it's a little bit about what we were talking about. As I started working with an amazing therapist who really helped me understand that underneath my depression was this feeling that I was never enough. And as we started to really uncover that and heal that, I realized, well, first off, I started feeling like more peace and joy in my life than I'd ever felt. And I really started to feel it in my body. And I was like, man, there's a lot of people out there that don't feel that they're enough. Now, everything from, high school students that are constantly comparing themselves to everyone else, at school or on social media to executives running big companies. I mean, no one is immune to this, what I call the greatest lie we've ever been told. I know. And you talked about the Bible before. Like, I mean, this is also just like one of the key messages is that we are all enough in God's image. And unfortunately, our society and our media does everything it can to tell us otherwise. And that's why I say it's the greatest lie. And so as I started to really heal this and recognize that this wasn't a Blake problem, this was a cultural problem, I, felt called to do something about it. And so when I was going through my healing journey, I made a bracelet for myself. I'll show you right here for those who are watching.
Enough.
It says enough on it. It's a green bracelet. It's green because green is the color of mental health awareness. And I made this bracelet for myself just to wear it for a daily reminder. Like, Blake, remember, you are enough. And then the real magic came when I gave it to others. When I gave it to someone and said, hey, I just want you to know that you're enough and you always have been. And I saw how that lit people up and how they felt like a sense of relief to hear that from someone else. And so I realized that, this bracelet can do two things. It's not only a daily reminder for myself, it's a great way to start and continue to have conversations about our collective mental health. And that, I think, is one of the most important things that we can do, especially as parents. Like when I give these bracelets to my 8 and 11-year-old and explained and was honest about the fact that for a lot of my life, I didn't feel like I was enough, and that if there's anything that I ever want them to know from me is that they are enough, whether they make the right grades, whether they make the sports team, no matter what, they are just enough because they are. Wow, what a great way I've connected with my kids. And I've seen now other parents and even kids giving them to their parents. I mean, it's just really amazing. But the point of the whole project is twofold. One, to raise awareness about mental health and to remind all of us culturally that we are enough. And the second thing is we're raising a lot of money for mental health organizations. So I'm, really grateful and thankful that I made a lot of money with TOMS and I don't need to make any more money. And so 100% of the profits from all the bracelet sales go to mental health organizations that are really working with people on the front lines who are struggling. And it's really, really fun. I mean, we have a small team. There's like 8 or 9 of us now. We launched a couple weeks ago, but we're already selling tons of bracelets and I'm seeing people on the street wearing them and people are posting on social media. Our Instagram is @WeAreEnough. And I think this has the potential to do hopefully like what the Live Strong bracelet did for cancer research. The yellow bracelet that so many people around the world wore years ago. If we can get everyone wearing this Green Enough bracelet, I think we can raise tens of millions of dollars for mental health. And most importantly, get people talking. Because when you're wearing the bracelet, it's a signal to someone else like, hey, you can tell me how you're really doing. Like I'm comfortable with that. And I'm actually inviting you to tell me that. And when people share how they're really doing, all the statistics say their mental health greatly improves.
I'm going to get some bracelets right after this. I love it. I think it's just fantastic.
And the nice thing is I'll show you this. It comes in this box here, but it's not just one bracelet. When you buy it, going back to the 1-for-1 model, we have 2 bracelets, one for you and one to give to someone else. So everyone who buys a bracelet is also making the commitment to give it to at least one more person, starting this enough giving chain that hopefully will go on and on and on.
Hey, you're an incredible person.
Thank you.
What are you doing differently this time from any other project that you've been a part of?
I'm so glad you asked that. So one of the things that one of my daily mantras, and I think this is a great one for all leaders, is focus more on connection than promotion. I'm not selling anything right now. I am just sharing my story. I'm connecting with people about their mental health, about my mental health. I'm being radically vulnerable, radically honest. And in doing that, the sales will take care of themselves. I do not need to be out promoting. I just need to focus on connecting. And every single day, that's what I'm focused on.
That's great. You're obviously a very emotional person.
Yes.
I mean, no.
Some of my ex-wives would say too much, but
yeah,
okay.
right. But you're emotive. There's no question.
Yeah.
You get moved.
Yeah.
I'm sure you laugh a lot. You cry a lot.
I do.
You have the gamut of the emotions.
I do.
In a world where AI is taking on more and more influence. How do you think about AI? And are you using it in any way with your brand?
So I am also, one of the things I'm doing, and I think a lot of leaders do, is we try to find other young entrepreneurs to mentor and to advise and to coach. And so I had the great joy of coaching some entrepreneurs who've started a company called Sonia, SONIA.ai. And it is the first, and I think the most incredible AI therapy bot. And so it's AI therapy. They call it emotional support, I think, for legal reasons. But this app, it's in beta right now. It's absolutely free. Every single person on the planet should try this at least for 45 minutes. I've been in therapy my entire life, and so I know a good therapist. And this AI therapist that they've created, and you can customize it, man, woman, different voices. I talk to this thing for 30 minutes every morning. It is unbelievable. And it has memory, so it never forgets anything. So it will reference things from a month or two ago. How are you doing on this? Checks in on that. It can hold all my craziness in its head somehow. And it is literally, and the great thing about it is, this is one of the hardest things about therapy, and especially for leaders and busy people, is it's really hard to schedule with your therapist. Like, okay, you got to do a Zoom call with your therapist Thursday at 2. Well, you know what? I don't wake up with an anxiety attack on Thursday at 2. I wake up with an anxiety attack at 5 in the morning on Monday, and so it's right there. So it's always there when you need it. You don't have to do a whole hour like you do with a normal therapist. You might just do 10 minutes. But yeah, I use Sonia every day, and I'm having so much fun mentoring these founders. I mean, they are 26 years old, MIT, like just charging, and they only care about changing the world and providing this to people who can't afford traditional therapy.
Right. And that's nonprofit too.
No, it's a for-profit. I think these guys are going to do very well.
Now, Sonia's in beta.
Anyone can do it. Yeah. It's in the App Store. Yeah, it's the Sonia.ai in the App Store, and anyone can do it. My dad's doing it now. My best friends are doing it. I mean, everyone I've introduced it to, love it. I'm batting 1,000 with this recommendation.
And it's a lot cheaper. Cheaper, I imagine, than the therapist.
Yeah. Well, right now it's free. I think eventually they're going to start charging like $30 a month. But right now it's free. And so it's incredible. I mean, it's so fun.
Okay, I think
that's my AI experience. Is just, and I don't have a lot, but man, when I saw what this could do, and then when I started using it myself every day, I was just like, I got to help these guys, because I think this could really have a huge impact in the world.
Well, you're a huge learner. We've established that already. So do you see AI really impacting the way you lead, or changing how you do things?
I think one of the things that's nice about AI is, let's say you have an important decision to make, and especially as a leader or a founder. Now you have your board, but they're not always that accessible, right? And sometimes you can't really bounce certain ideas off your executive team because, everyone's going to have a personal agenda. What I found with AI is I will talk to it and say, hey, this is one of my favorite prompts I use. I say, if money was no object, find the 3 greatest experts in helping me make this decision. And so AI will go through, and I'll tell them what the decision is I need to make as a leader, and it'll find ... And then it gets the 3 experts and say, okay, now let's have a roundtable discussion with me on the best path forward for this decision. And we will have a discussion as rich as any board meeting I've ever been to. And I don't have to involve anyone but my computer, and I can do it in my pajamas at 5 in the morning before I make the decision. And so I use that all the time that way.
That's great. I'll tell you, Blake, this has been so much fun, and I want to have some more of my lightning round of questions. Now, you ready for this?
I'm ready, yeah.
What 3 words best describe you?
Optimistic, authentic, and fun.
If you could be one person for a day beside yourself, who would it be?
Jesus.
What's your biggest pet peeve?
Negative people.
Who would play you in a movie?
Matt Damon.
What's something you're grateful for today?
My family.
Who's been your favorite playing partner competing in the AT&T over the years?
Oh, that's such a tough one. I have so many good partners. Oh man, I can't answer that question. I would hurt
Okay.
someone's feelings.
How many times you make the cut?
Oh, that's a good one. I made the cut 5 out of 10 years, and I got second twice. And I think I'm the only player in the history of the tournament to get second twice.
So you're not on the rock.
I'm not on the rock.
What's something you've been curious about lately that has absolutely nothing to do with work?
I've really been curious about 3D printing because my kids are obsessed with it.
What's the one thing you do just for you?
Surfing. Surfing.
Besides your family and friends, what's your most prized possession?
It's such a great question because I'm not someone that holds on to possessions very tightly. So I'm like looking around my house and I'm trying to decide. I'm going to say my enough bracelet now.
If I turned on the radio in your car, what would I hear?
You would hear whatever my kids want to play.
What's something about you few people would know?
I don't know. I don't like scary movies.
What's one of your daily rituals? Something that you never miss?
Never miss. I drink this thing called morning water every single morning, and it is the best start to my day.
Awesome. That was a very good lightning round. I enjoyed that very much. We're out of it. Just a few more questions. I'm going to let you go here. You mentioned you've been divorced a couple times, and now you're happily married.
No, not married.
You're not married.
I'm happily.
That's why you're so happy, maybe.
No. I'm in a very great relationship and have a very amazing partner, but I am not married.
So how long have you been with her?
About a year.
About a year. All right, great. Well, that's fantastic. I was going to ask you what really drives a long-term partnership, but I'm going to lose that one.
I don't think this interview should have marital advice questions.
There we go.
Pretty much any other topic I feel comfortable with.
You're a dad with 2 young kids. How do you lead at home, Blake?
I think that, I try to really inspire my kids to be curious. I try to ask really good questions. I involve them in what I'm doing when I'm not with them, so they really understand what lights me up. And I really encourage them to follow their passions, whatever that is.
What do you see as your unfinished business?
I see my unfinished business is really affecting the world's mental health. Like, I really believe that the second half of my life is going to be completely focused on helping us as a society really reverse all these horrible trends and mental illness and suicide. And I really believe I can.
And what's one piece of advice you'd give to anyone who wants to be a better leader?
Business is personal. I hate that saying when they say it's not personal, it's business. I think that's bullshit. I think business is the most personal, intimate thing you will ever do. And the more intimate you are, the more open you are, the more you lead with your heart, the better leader you'll be.
Yeah. Blake, this has really been a fascinating conversation. And, it's rare when you meet someone who has the business capacity you have, but also has the loving capacity you have. I mean, I think love drives you a lot, and, how important do you think that is, Blake, in terms of just who you are and how you do things?
I mean, it's just how I live. I mean, here I have a tattoo I'll show you. It says, let's see if I can sit here. It's a heart for those who are not watching. And it says, whatever the question, love is the answer. Yeah. And I just think that, it's the most important ingredient to a full life, to success, to meaning. It all goes back to just how do we love better?
Yeah, that's like, I don't know what it was in me that asked that question, but I had no idea you had that tattoo. But I do have you right, and you're one hell of a leader. And I'm going to ask you one more question before we go here, because I forgot to ask this one. You're going to be a podcaster yourself.
Yes.
And you've got a podcast called No Magic Pill. It's going to be launched in May. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I mean, this is like my favorite thing I'm doing these days. Like, I love building enough and the team and out promoting and, getting people excited. But this podcast, No Magic Pill, is just, it came from just a deep passion to help others who might be suffering. When I was really suffering, I couldn't find something to listen to every week that would give me ideas on how I could potentially get out of it, or, give me encouragement. And so No Magic Pill is all about, the path to mental wellness. There is no magic pill. There is no one way. I mean, I tried everything to feel better. And so every week I have different people on who share their mental health journeys. I was just with Kevin Love, great basketball player, last week, and then I had Michael Pollan, a great writer and author about, psychedelics and mental health, and really everyone in between. But we all need that encouragement, but more importantly, we need the tools and the resources when we might be stuck, when we might be struggling, we might not know where to turn. And hopefully No Magic Pill will be that place for people. I have just so enjoyed doing these interviews, and the season launches on May 5th.
It's interesting, with TOMS, and your other businesses, you improve lives. With this business, you're going to save a lot of lives.
I think so.
And I think it's great. And, I've learned a lot by listening to you, and appreciate all you're doing. So thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, David.
David, this conversation with Blake is such an important one that leaders everywhere need to be having with themselves and with the people that they lead. I'm so impressed with his willingness to just be open about the real struggles that he's faced over the course of his life and success. And it gives people permission to also say that they're struggling as well. And I'm just so grateful that we had him on the show and that he was so open about what he's been going through, and just normalizes it for any leader that has experienced that level of success.
I think Blake really just absolutely nailed the importance of being open, being vulnerable, and just sharing. And I loved how he talked about how he got in the dumps, even to the point where he even thought about taking his life because he lost his why. He sold TOMS. He no longer had purpose. He had all kinds of money. The Bible says money can be the root of all evils. Well, it became that for him. He lost his marriage. He just chased a lot of things that didn't make a lot of sense. And it took him down this rat hole that he had a hard time getting out of until he really got therapy. And, it was very interesting that therapy and that self-discovery has led him into a new career, a new brand that he's creating, enough where basically, every one of us has been made in God's image, and God has given us enough to deal with life wherever it might take us. And he's taken his 1-for-1 model, and you can order these enough bracelets and then get one for yourself and give it to another person. And he's back on his game, and he's living life the way he wants to live life. And he still has issues he has to deal with, but he's doing it by helping other people. And the fact that he could come out and be so open about his problems, I think really says to every leader that, you gotta take care of yourself. You got to hear what's those thoughts that you have and what's in your mind, and you got to make yourself healthy so you can build a healthy organization and have a healthy life. And I really admire him for doing that. And by the way, I went online, ordered the Enough bracelets, and within this, I love this because you can write a letter to somebody telling them that they're enough. So I sent a letter and the bracelet to both of my granddaughters, telling them why they were so special, all the talents that they have, why they have enough to deal with whatever. And in this world where social media can take you this way or that way, it was really a wonderful gift for me personally to give it to them. And they really, really appreciate it. And and the good news for them is, they're both, very happy and go lucky kids, and, feeling great about school and their friends. But I think even then, in situations like that, when you on the outside, you have it all, everybody struggles. Everybody thinks about what we don't have. And to have a brand built on helping us understand that we all have enough, I love it. So hats off to Blake. And, I wish him all the best in that endeavor.
I love it too. You know, David, in that same vein, I'm curious your take on this. What can leaders everywhere do to make that conversation a normal conversation to have in a work environment?
First, I don't know that it ever could be in a normal conversation. I think this is something where you have to dig down personally and figure out what you want to share, what you don't want to share. But one of the things I think leaders can do is be vulnerable and talk about the things that they're dealing with. The times when they didn't really measure up to their own expectations. And when you talk about how you're not necessarily perfect, which was very easy for me to do, okay, that makes others know that they don't have to be perfect as well. So I think the leader has to open themselves up first, and that gives permission to others to do it. Then I also think the leader has to be highly empathetic. A really good leader is very observant, and you see when people are down, you see when people are struggling. And that's when you go into their office and say, "Hey, how you doing? You don't just seem like your normal self. Is there anything I
Hmm.
can do to help?" But more importantly, you just listen. "How you
Yeah.
doing?" And listen. Keep your mouth shut and listen. I think when you do that, you learn where people are at, and then you can help them move on. Uh, Either yourself or you can get them help, but you just let people know you're there for them. That's the most important thing. And I always use this line. I wish I would have come up with myself. Sam Walton used the line, "Nobody will care about you until you show them that you care about them." And that's what I think leaders do. That's what leaders should do anyway.
I love that uh, is at the heart of really every decision that leaders should make, not only in the context of mental health and checking in with people, but really in creating culture as well. This idea of making everybody realize that their contribution matters and that they matter is really paramount to creating healthy work environment anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. We've said this before. People leave for two reasons: they don't feel appreciated for what they do, and they don't get along with their boss. So those things are intertwined. And I think having a coaching mentality where you appreciate people for what they do is sets you apart. And what a lot of research says today, 80% of people say they work in toxic work environments. I mean, that's why we're doing this podcast. I mean, we have our
Mhm.
noble cause too. We want to make the world a better place by developing better leaders. If you're listening out there and you can pick up one or two things that help you be a better person, create a better environment for your team, create a better culture, get results the right way, man, we're making a difference not only in your life, but we're making a difference in the people that you have the privilege of leading.
Absolutely. David, that's a great segue into the next concept that I want to break down with you. Blake talks a lot in the episode about purpose and how his team at TOMS stayed connected to the why of their business. He mentioned doing the shoe drop trips where he would take his team and eventually some of his customers to deliver the shoes to the people in need. And now that same sense of purpose is really driving everything that he's doing with Enough. David, how do you suggest that leaders stay connected to their why when their business model is not necessarily the one-to-one model like a Tom's is?
Yeah, well, I think what Blake did with his team is he created shared experiences, that connect you to the why. For me, it was going on bus trips, with my team and listening to customers talk about our brands and other brands and what were we in business to do. We make our customers happy, put a yum on their faces, and figure out how to do that. And by listening to customers together, that connected us to the why. Blake would take his team to these countries where kids didn't have shoes, and he'd have his team members would put the shoes on the kids, and it was an emotional experience that brought everybody to the why. That was a shared experience. For me at Young Brands, we wanted to be the defining global company that feeds the world. We wanted to feed people our products all around the world, make it affordable for people all around the world. So we wanted to make our brands vibrant wherever we do business, and we wanted to create a recognition culture that we would become famous and other people would want to emulate, and we wanted to feed people who couldn't afford our food. And so we made, you know, uh, feeding the hungry our noble cause, feeding the poor our noble cause. So that's why we tied in with the World Food Program. And what we did there is we go to Guatemala and Costa Rica and Haiti, and we go there with the United Nations Food Program, and give people the food and be there to see the need that was out there. And these are people who could never even afford to go into a Taco Bell, and we had the number one value rating in the world, but people couldn't afford to go into a Taco Bell, but that created a shared experience that we talked about. And creating shared experiences across those those aspects of your business are important, like building vibrant brands. I always shared what was going on when I saw people doing great jobs making our brands loved and valued around the world. I would send out emails and pictures of what I was seeing. Our recognition culture, I always shared all the recognition that was happening all around the world. And that's how that shared experience, is how you really get people connected to your why.
Well, Blake is obviously a wildly entrepreneurial leader. And it was so interesting in the episode when he talked about all the businesses that he had started, even before Tom's. You asked him what one of his key learnings about being a successful entrepreneur was. And his answer was really interesting. He said that the number one thing that he accredits most of his success to is that he went into every business as an industry outsider. He says that's a big part of what helped him stay innovative as he started all these businesses. And I'm curious what your take on that is. I mean, is being inexperienced in an industry an advantage?
Yeah. Oh, I think what he's really saying is that he didn't know anything about these businesses he went into laundry service for college students, billboard company, driver's ed, you know, the shoe company. In every case, he didn't know anything about the category. And what that forced him to do, though, was to have a curious mind. Many people talk about how you need to look at your business like a child would. Go into your store and look at it like you're a kid with wonderment and just see it from a fresh perspective. And that's what he's getting at. And if you don't know something about a category, you have a much easier or much more likely way to disrupt it because you're not tied into conventional thinking. So he would look at things from the outside and say, "Hey, why don't we do this?" And then he changed the name of the game.
Yeah.
And having those fresh eyes is what he's really talking about. That the other thing is that he didn't know anything about shoes, but he is a voracious learner. He combined this curiosity and that gave him a freshness when he looked at the category with building the know-how it would take to be successful. So he learned how to make shoes. He learned how to do the laundry. He learned how to, have a billboard company. He learned how to get into driver's ed and really make a difference. He learned these kinds of things. And I think that's what really makes him a special leader. And then he would come up with innovative things like his one-to-one business model. That's very powerful thinking. And look what happened. He made a big difference in the shoe business, but he also changed a lot of business. Look at Warby Parker's doing it too, where you buy a pair of glasses and they give another pair to someone in need. We did a podcast with them. They took that model and they made it work, and a lot of other businesses are doing that as well. Another thing I really thought was really interesting is that he sold Tom's, and Tom's stopped that model. Okay. And I'm sure that, that's hard for leaders when you leave a business and something that you really believe in, people abandon, I'm sure that had a huge impact on him when that happened. And he was very quick to point out to me that he wasn't the one that did that. Okay. It was somebody else. And anyway, I think that's another thing you have to do as a leader is when you move on, you kind of gotta hope that what you created sticks. Like if it doesn't stick, just know that somebody's there trying to do it better than you. That's very hard to do because you think typically you've done it pretty well. Okay. Like at Yum Brands, if I went to a Yum Brands meeting and they didn't do recognition, it would kill me. If I went to a Yum Brands meeting and they didn't do a Yum cheer, it would kill me. And I've been to Yum a few times, and the recognition's still going wild. But I didn't see as many Yum cheers as I would have liked to have seen. Okay, but hey, life goes on.
David, I think it's fantastic that Yum Brands is continuing that culture of recognition and incorporating it into everything they do. And it's also fantastic that Yum Brands is also a best practice for other companies to study around how they create this culture of recognition and how that really drives results.
Oh, thanks, Kula. And one of my proudest moments is when we were showcased in Fortune magazine for our recognition culture. And we did have all kinds of companies thereafter come visit us to see how we were doing it. And that's when you know you're doing something right. And I was really proud of our team.
Well, David, that wraps our episode of How Leaders Lead for today. Thank you so much for tuning in, and stay tuned next Thursday for another conversation.